Hello, fellow foodies. In today's episode, we're going to take you all the way down to tropical Suriname, where one of my friends and colleagues has been working for a number of years with the indigenous people of this area of the Amazon. Let me tell you a bit about our guest. Dr. Bruce Hoffman is an ethnobotanist and a tropical botanist with more than 25 years of field experience in the Guiana Shield region of the Amazon. He began his career in the tropics as a botanical expedition leader in Guyana with the Smithsonian Institution. And from the late 1990s onward, Bruce transitioned from a career in plant taxonomy to ethnobotany and biocultural conservation. He's worked now for several decades with the Amazon Conservation Team, which applies a field-based approach to partnering with local communities to protect tropical forest landscapes. He's actually currently dialing in today from Suriname, where he's coordinating the Amazon Conservation Team programs and activities with communities in remote forests near Brazil. I'm super excited to have you on the show, Bruce. Thanks so much for dialing in.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the nice introduction.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to sharing what I'm doing down here.
Great. Well, why don't we start by just telling us a bit about the communities that you work with as part of your job with the Amazon Conservation Team?
Yeah, well, I'm working in a small country, Suriname. Suriname is unknown to many people in the north, in the temperate zone. It's a small country north of Brazil, and it's east of a territory called French Guiana, part of France, and it's west of that, and east of Guyana, which is the former British Guyana colony. I came into Guyana in 1991, working for the Smithsonian and working, as you mentioned, Cassie, with plant collecting and looking for new species. And as I did that work, I was often working with indigenous people. And, every time you go on an expedition, you generally fly into an airstrip, which is near a community, and you ask local people to help you. And so I got to know over time these communities, and I just started to think, I really want to do something to protect their way of life and their options, and also to protect the plants rather than only collecting them and looking for new species, which is absolutely important and fascinating. But I really enjoyed working with the people and wanted to do something on the ground with them and in with the forces of globalization coming in and a lot of knowledge being lost.
Yeah.
So I eventually transitioned to Suriname, and that's where I've been working in South Suriname with these communities for these many decades.
And so these communities, am I correct in understanding you work with the Trio people and also maroons?
Yeah, I'm working with the Amazon Conservation Team, and so we are working in various villages, Trio indigenous people, Wayana indigenous people, various mixes of indigenous people that are within those communities. So you might say Trio, there's actually 7, 8, 10 different groups that can trace back to some other culture, but the dominant culture is Trio in the southwest of Suriname and Wayana in the southeast of Suriname. Then in the center of Suriname are what are called maroons. There's different terms, but they have their own name for themselves. They don't see maroon as a bad term, but it is seen that way by some people. Think it's not a good word to use.
Okay, good. What is their preferred term?
They, like most tribes and cultures, they refer to themselves as their own name. So there's the Saramacans is very dominant, one of the first tribes. Well, first I have to say the maroons are the descendants of enslaved Africans. So that's something that people may not know anything about. They were escaped from plantations, and some of the early people that were enslaved were from British colonial powers, and others later were from Dutch. So large groups of them began to escape into the forest, and it's quite unique. You don't have anything like that in Guyana, and many places they didn't survive, but in Suriname they survived, and they went into the interior and formed villages, and were living a tribal life basically. And until today, they're probably the most traditional maroons in South America and the Caribbean, and they are of course changing rapidly, but the maroons are forming large populations, up to maybe 25% of the population of Suriname, and they're living on 5 main rivers that are in Suriname. So any of the rivers you go, Suriname is coastal, with the capital cities coastal, and then the interior after the coastal kind of crowded area where most people are, then you travel into the interior, almost immediately you are in rainforest.
Wow.
And on those rivers going south, you travel upriver on those rivers, and you will get to communities very quickly. And the way the maroons are living, they're all along the rivers. So you go village,
Mm-hmm.
all the way up to the southernmost point is maybe half an hour by plane. It's a full day by boat, and you find also each of those rivers has a different culture. So you have people with different names. So the Saramacans live on the Suriname River, and they are the most best known group. But then you have the Matawai, you have the Quinti, you have another group broadly described as Juka. I won't go into too much detail on that.
But there's a lot of diversity then, cultural diversity. I can imagine that they also have unique traditional knowledge because they came with knowledge of landscapes from the African continent, and then I'm assuming applied some of that to the South American forests, but also developed their own new sets of knowledge. Have you found that to be true with their food systems and in your work with them?
Yeah, definitely. And I need to first say that there's a scholar, Tinda van Andel, and so her work is very important in all of this. And I've been looking at these systems, but I have not published major works on the maroons, and I'm not an expert on the maroons. But I did my dissertation with comparing trio and maroon, the Saramacans, particular group, and their use of different kinds of forests, different forest types. And certainly, it's something that we have, it's been documented by previous researchers and explorers, and Tinda van Andel and her groups that she has been publishing with gone deep into some of that information.
Yeah.
But it is definitely the case that people arrived with knowledge in their heads, and they looked around and they saw in some cases the similar species and using similar plant families in similar ways. They also learned from the indigenous people, and then also they had their own knowledge, and you can see that also in the names, and that's something I'm particularly fascinated with, are the names for plants and the names for things that many of them have African roots from different language groups in Africa.
So, yeah. Bruce, I think most people listening today have never been to the Amazon. I'm wondering if you could maybe paint a picture of what some of the traditional villages look like. If you're coming up on the river, what would you see if this was your first visit to a village in Suriname?
I think the image is in a lot of people's heads, but and of course it's rapidly changing. So the way that buildings are made, built, people like to have zinc buildings, roofs now. people are almost always on the river now. Okay, so you'll see a river bank. In the Guyanas, they have black water. So you might see there's some places with a clear, almost reddish in the sun, but they're called black water rivers, and they're nutrient poor and often with white sand in this black water. And I've always been able to drink black water and never gotten sick. I think partly that's just nutrient poor. Not immediately downriver from a village, but you would. It's a very different kind of river, and then other rivers are white water and they're more muddy, and you can't see clearly in them. So you have that different look of the whole landscape depending on which river system you're on. And when I come up to let's say Kwamlasamutu, which is the village I'm working in a lot, they have a very high river bank because the river gets high and they have to live well above the river to not be flooded every year. And then along that river bank are thatched huts. They're using a small palm for the thatch. It's Geonoma baculifera. It's a very nice little palm. And so it's a very nice weave they make with that palm and mixing things. So you see these huts with these thatched tops, and especially in the past, the walls were not very common. People were just living basically outdoors with, very well-built structures from the forest. These posts that don't decay for a decade at least, and hammocks. So you always see hammocks, and you'll see half of a canoe where they're processing cassava. Mm-hmm. So that's probably the most important activity is to plant and harvest and then process this cassava, which it's also called yucca for people that don't know the word cassava. And there's bitter cassava which has cyanide in it and is easy to preserve and store because nothing can eat it. And then you have sweet cassava. So you have different kinds and many varieties of each kind.
That's great.
And you always see ladies, women, processing, girls and their mothers, processing this cassava. They have to grate it and squeeze it and get the juice out because the juice of the bitter one has cyanide. And literally a dog will die if it drinks that stuff. So in the capital city, I didn't realize it for a long time, but it's actually, they don't allow the bitter cassava. So
really?
Everybody is eating sweet cassava. So
yeah.
Normal in the villages that you have this extremely toxic substance around, and they're always making bread out of it, and it's one of my favorite foods.
That's great. And I guess by grating the cassava, they open up those cells and release some of that cyanide compound. As far as I understand with the process, that the processing itself helps to remove a lot of the poisonous element. Yeah. Do they make chicha there also, or masato? I don't know how they would call it in Suriname, the alcoholic beverage from chewing the cassava and fermenting it.
Yeah, they say that they don't do that anymore. They just use old material to keep on. But it was a real, stigma. Everybody's saying, "Oh, they spit in their cassava, in their drinks." So, oh, how disgusting, So, they've been, people always say that regularly. So, they say they don't do that. But anyway, it's fermented for sure, yeah. And it's actually a little bit, I'd say, becoming a little problematic. That I think with the breakdown in our culture, they're drinking more alcohol, and the size, because there's also a special kind of cassava for making the fermented drink. They call the drink cassidi in Suriname, and that the size of the field that is devoted to that kind has been getting larger and larger.
Huh.
So you see the food
More booze, less bread. Okay. I think we all feel a bit like that right now. Or maybe it's more booze and bread during COVID. Well, besides cassava, so we talked about the women are really involved in this. Do the men engage in hunting and fishing, or what are some other major sources of food or income in these communities?
Yeah, the men are, they're cutting the farm, so they're still using this what they say slash and burn
Mm-hmm.
method, which is fine when the population is low and when there's plenty of land. Then it seems to be working fine. But it becomes problematic because if you stay in one place, then you have to go further and further to find forest that's old enough to have some fertility in it to burn. But anyway, the men, that's their job. You do see a division, gender division, and in the culture, and sometimes it doesn't look that great for women. Women often carry everything. They bring the firewood, for example. The men cut the firewood. The men cut in the forest, the farm, and the men hunt and fish. That is their job. But the women have to go out and with an axe cut the wood into pieces and then carry back all this extremely heavy load. And with the cassava also, they have to go and take the tubers and carry that back. And it can easily be, more than 100 pounds.
Wow.
And you even see old grandmas, carrying these loads because they're accustomed to it. Sometimes you see a man walking with his wife, and he just has a gun or a machete in his hand, and she has this giant load in hands. But the idea is that he's supposed to, if he hears a animal like a peccary, he's going to run and just drop everything
And go for it.
Yeah.
What's a peccary, by the way, Bruce? I think most people may not be familiar with that.
It's like what we call a bush pig.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's there's the white-lipped peccary. There's there's two kinds, basically two major kinds. One with a few individuals, and one with 100. A smaller one with maybe 100 individuals, and they're very dangerous, especially the small ones. You hear them in the forest, and it sounds like an ocean wave.
Wow.
They're so deep, and they're going through the underbrush, and it just sounds like the ocean. And the first time I was like, what's that? And these, the guys that were with me, the local guys are like, telling me, climb a tree, do something, don't be here when they get here.
Wow. And, do they have tusks that can cut you?
Yeah.
Do they have tusks? Okay. Mm-hmm.
And they also, I've heard, will circle around you until you're disoriented and fall over.
Oh.
But I don't know if that's, I want to hear some more stories about that.
Yeah.
But, it's, these guys, they hunt them, so they're not scared. They always have a gun in their hands, they don't hunt with bows and arrows anymore. Mm-hmm. But they were very skilled with that in the past, and some of them still bring their bow and arrow along.
That's great.
But the gun, they're not scared at all, and they go hunting them. But me, I might shoot myself in the foot or something, so I'm not gonna.
So you're not bringing that along with your plant clippers and herbarium press, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Well,
so I climbed a tree, and and was just hoping that the tree wouldn't fall, break or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so we have cultivation of plants like cassava. What about wild forage plants, especially medicinal teas? Is that something that's common still in these communities? Do they still collect wild medicinal plants? Or also plants just to consume as food from the wild?
Certainly. And it's becoming, as you might expect with the pandemic situation, it's becoming more important than ever. And I think it's kind of a watershed moment that might be an incredible opportunity because people realize that they can't depend necessarily on the outside world to provide everything like it's been doing. So, or not, not everything, but it's been kind of, will be bailed out if there's an emergency, and as the young people, which is happening globally in these communities, don't learn as much, don't care as much, they think more about the outside world. That even can be on Facebook because they have access. So, things are changing a lot, but they still are dependent on the land where they are. And the airplanes, because this place, most of the places in southern Suriname now are only accessible by plane, realistically. So the planes have to keep landing. It's like living in Hawaii, the boats have to keep coming, right?
Yeah.
Going to be out of food in a few weeks.
Yeah.
And they're not getting all their food from planes, but a lot of things come in. Doctors can come in when there's an emergency. People can fly out. So they've been maybe losing some of their traditional knowledge because they have this outside support system. And now suddenly they're seeing, planes aren't coming, stuff isn't coming, and this virus, we don't know if it's coming or not. So they are starting to use local medicines. They've been, especially with ACT, we have traditional clinics in all of these villages, and we have healers that are in, each clinic. So it's been a kind of a renaissance, I think, in people saying, hey, look, this is our local medicine. It's helping us. And so, you've had this tradition, and people are still very much using plants from the forest. And it's great to see, and we've been, as an organization, ACT, myself, just personally, trying to promote that, and that people keep that knowledge and realize how important it is. And I'd say, so, okay, there's these grand masters, these guys, healers and shamans that know hundreds of plants and can make lots of medicine, but even the general knowledge is quite high, and people are, regularly, if you're hunting, you have to know some of these medicines. You can get lost and need to know what you can eat.
Yeah.
And I promoted in schools, in the elementary schools, in say in Kwamo-Wasamutu, in Tepu, other villages, promoting the shamans giving first aid classes to the students, which the school, which the government can kind of accept. They're like, oh, they're not doing anything spiritual, dangerous. It's first aid,
Yeah,
so if you get cut, and you're in the forest, because all these people are in the forest, even if they are on Facebook and getting influenced and want some Nikes, they're still in the forest constantly. And so they are indigenous in their core, no matter what is happening, on the other levels. So now they know if they get cut, they know what plant is a good emergency plant to stop.
A good emergency plant to stop the bleeding. That's so key. I think you're right that what this is teaching us is the value of traditional knowledge in reinforcing this concept of resilience. How do communities deal with something that's incredibly traumatic, incredibly, just cuts off normal resources, like you're saying, with the sources of food and other supplies through planes? How do they deal with that? And I think this is a time that's really unique in ethnobotany in particular, because this is the drum we've been beating, for a very long time, that traditional knowledge is key to survival. Ethnobotany is the science of survival, and ensuring that communities are able to maintain that knowledge is so key. So key. Well, I know in addition to your work with medicinal plants, you're also engaged in a number of projects to kind of help build up um, local sources of economic gain, especially for women that are in the villages. Can you tell us a bit about those? Maybe the honey project, the stingless bees?
Yeah, I love that. I love this Stingless Bee project. I think it's becoming more popularized now. The whole the awareness in the world of these the presence, the existence of these stingless bees. They are forest bees. They're native bees,
They're
and
native bees. I didn't realize that. Okay.
yeah, and I like to think of them as forest bees. I saw them advertised on a kind of new age site as gentle bees.
The gentle forest bees. I like that.
But basically, honey in the world, it comes from mostly one species, right? And so yeah, you have your varieties of what has been what flowers have been used, nectar collected, and pollen and things, and you have your different um, types, and you have your Africanized bees, which started from an accident, from an escape in Manaus in Brazil. And that one mistake of an escaped queen led to just, and you know, it affected the whole world, I guess. I mean, especially the Americas. But it had an effect of economic, all kinds of effects from these Africanized bees, which are very aggressive, but maybe getting more gentle as they have been migrating. But now they're in Texas. I mean, they've been in Texas for a while. They're all over the place, and in some places they're extremely aggressive. But they produce ridiculous amounts of honey. They're so productive, So people put on their suits and they can work with these bees. So that's the dominant thing in all the stores is your normal apis mellifera honey, and then you have the stingless bees, and there's 500 species, 600 species. So you have especially these melanoponins that are one of the genera of stingless bees. It's the most used in stingless bee honey. Mm-hmm. But instead of one species, you have hundreds.
Interesting.
And each of them has a different relationship with the forest. It uses certain flowers. It has a different kind of nest, a different kind of entrance to the nest or location in the tree and behavior. And the people in villages that have been living with these bees, for hundreds, thousands of years, are knowledgeable about all of these behavioral aspects. And this was first really popularized with Daryl Posey and the Kayapo and ethnobotanist bees, which they were doing. They knew a lot of different bees and behavior, and they had a special relationship, and it is with the Mayans also. They have this ancient relationship with bees, and they have a bee god, where there are several bee gods, So you have this old relationship of bees being almost like another tribe of people. Wow. You see that in a lot of mythology. Including in Suriname and in Kwamla, they have kind of bee people. The name of the tribe, one of the tribes is like the bee people. So these stingless bees are generally smaller and from kind of half the size of a normal honeybee to much smaller, to tiny, to very cute, and almost. We'll keep them almost as a hobby, these tiny bees, and I mean it's like a pet, but the main thing about the honey is stingless bee honey is that it is widely thought to be medicinal. So people recognized that this honey from the forest is more medicinal than this Africanized or just honeybee honey, which is already thought to be medicinal, right? But
Yeah.
this is hyper medicinal, and there's different uses for different kinds of bees. And for example, the tiny ones are often used in Brazil for eye problems. And then I found use in Suriname.
I guess it all comes down to, like you were saying, that they're pollinating different plants, and perhaps some of those are medicinal plants or plants that have medicinal compounds that they're incorporating into their honey. And that's where biodiversity is so important. I love that there are different types of honeys, and it speaks to the health of the forest as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the stingless bee topic it covers everything. You know, it covers traditional knowledge. You want to protect the forest because the bees live in the forest. So you don't want to cut the trees down, or the bees will, disappear. And then there's the health, that they can feed their children with this honey. And then there's the economic potential. So let me just switch to that idea of what we're doing with, and I've been mostly the person doing the non-timber forest product kind of things in Kwamla Samutu. And Kwamla is where we started the honey project. And it is not as big, it's kind of introductory in a few other villages. And the idea is that we learn about the collect traditional knowledge. So I did interviews, and I even have drawings of by an indigenous guy of like every kind of bee he knows and where they are in the hive, and their behavior. Are they aggressive? Are they not aggressive? Because some of them, they don't sting, but they can be annoying. They can get in your hair and your ears, and they can. Some of them are pretty nasty. I have that all drawn out, these different types, and then we figured out, okay, this set of bees is probably the best. They have the best tasting honey according to the local people. They're gentle. They can be. They don't die too easily. And they also make other products. They make pollen, and the wax kind of that they seal their hive with is what they make into what's called propolis.
Propolis, yeah, that also has some medicinal properties.
Yes, very strong. And propolis is that they put propolis on the entrance to their nest. Usually there's a landing platform, and they cover that with a propolis. So when the bees land after having gone outside, they kind of get cleaned by this antimicrobial.
It's like a disinfection station for them coming in and out. That's great.
Proven that some of the resins they collect are antimicrobial against the worst pathogens of the bee brood. So it's very, very specific. Propolis is not each bee. They make it specifically to protect. It's a protective thing, not just that there's a hole and they want to cover the hole. It's
yeah.
Keeping a whole nest clean. And so people have discovered that they can take this and make a solution out of it, and it has a lot of health properties.
Yeah, cool. Are there special containers that are being used, or how is this all working?
They have to get the hive out of the trees, and so in the beginning of the project, I won't lie, we cut down a few trees. And that's how you get the hive. Otherwise, you could die trying to get up there and get the hive free. One of the great surprises, one of the pleasant surprises in this project was the discovery of a kind of bee. It may be a new species that puts like 5 nests in one tree. None of the other species were doing that in Suriname. And so you look up a tree and you just see it's like an apartment complex, and just like boom, boom, boom. So you can cut down one tree and get 5 hives. So that's, and we did have some video in the beginning showing the cutting of a tree, and people were like, that's terrible, you're destroying the forest. So that's really, it's a bad image, but actually that's just the start, and you just have the start population, and then you put them into boxes. And the boxes that we're using it's a Brazilian design called the IPA box. That's a research institute in Manaus. But the boxes are kind of vertical, and so it's made to be like a tree. And the way that structure they have in the tree, which is a vertical structure on their nest, is the same for these hives. And I'd say the big hurdle that we got over was that we found two men that are like just made to be beekeepers and like scientists. I mean, these guys, they're so precise, they care so much, and that is the success or failure of any of these projects, is finding that person or people that can do that. And ever since they came on board, I also went to Brazil and I trained myself in Belém about beekeeping with the stingless bees. And I was connected to a guy, a Brazilian PhD student who's graduated doctor now, and he came and stayed in Suriname. And with him, with his expertise and with these guys in the village, then this project really took off. And the idea is that you get a certain population of bees in boxes, and then you can split the hives. So you teach people to make the boxes, and so they're now, even right now as I speak, they're making boxes in the village. They have the tools and the knowledge to make these very precise boxes. And then they put the hive in the box in the right way. It's complicated. It's easy for them to die if pests get in there. And then at a certain point, you split the hive. And then so now you double the number of hives. And you don't go back to trees anymore. That's just an initial beginning part. So now we have at least 150 boxes in that village, and they are selling propolis already. And propolis is a pretty expensive, it's a pretty high price thing.
That's great. So in the end, even though it requires taking down a few trees in the beginning to get started, you might actually be helping fill an economic hole that could prevent deforestation at a larger scale. Is that kind of the idea there? Because you're bringing in money through this project.
Yeah, and the reason why we say and why it's interesting, or what's the reason? Why do they need money? People might say, oh, but they have what they need. But what's been happening is they do need money, and they do need clothes from the city. They need various things in these days, and they will leave the village. Especially men will leave the village and go gold mining or logging or do something that's very dangerous and also very unsustainable to the landscape. So that's probably the biggest threat in Suriname right now to the forest is the gold mining.
Yeah.
And so when these guys leave to make some money, then they may not come back for months or years, and the women get kind of left behind. Sometimes they receive supplies or money or goods from the men. Sometimes they don't, and so and sometimes the women leave also, and then they leave their child with their grandmother or something. So it's that need to go to the city is breaking up the culture, and so if there's ways that they can earn money and stay in their community, then they're not participating in these dangerous activities. Sometimes they end up in the city with no money to fly back because every flight is expensive, and they can be in the city for 6 months trying to make enough money just to come back. So we're trying to make it an incentive to stay in the village, and we facilitate with looking for companies that they can market their products with.
That's great.
And
where can people go online to learn more about this project?
www.amazonteam.org.
Okay. And besides the these economic projects, I know you've also been really busy over the past few years working on a really big project on lianas. Can you show us your new book?
Oh, I'd love to. It's actually a few years old now, but considering how many years it took, it feels like very recent. Can you see that?
Yes, beautiful. I love the cover. Gorgeous. Lianas of the Guianas, for those that are just listening and don't see the video.
It's kind of an artistic project as well as a science project. It covers many of these woody lianas that are in the Guianas. So we're talking Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana, and many of these would then also be in adjoining areas in Brazil and Venezuela.
That's great. Wow, I need to check that one out. It looks really, really fascinating. And there's a number of medicinal lianas as well, I'm assuming, in that collection.
Oh yeah, certainly. They are highly medicinal. A high percentage of them is medicinal. Mm-hmm. There might be, say, 20 to 25% of the species in a given forest is made up of lianas, and the number of, let's say in Kwamala where I'm working with the trios, 30% or more of their pharmacopoeia is made of lianas.
Wow.
So it's a high percentage, relatively high percentage they're using for their medicines. One reason that it might be that lianas are medicinal, one theory is that they have a lot of leaf matter and very little woody matter, right? They're using trees to climb up, so they don't need to have all that structure. When they get up to the canopy, they spread out to get the sun. That means there's a very high percentage of their biomass is leaf material, and that's very tasty for insects, or could be tasty. What's thought, likely is that they are producing, there's more biochemistry to protect all
these defense compounds. Yeah. That's fascinating. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Bruce. This has been really enlightening, and I'm so excited to learn about all the cool stuff that you're doing down there.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your program.
Great.
On your podcast.
You've been listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious. If you'd like to subscribe to the show, be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts. You can also see full video coverage of each episode on YouTube at the Teach Ethnobotany channel, or you can visit our website at www.foodiepharmacology.com. Thank you so much for listening. Stay healthy out there, and I'll see you next time.